Hi, this is Peggy from RAR. So today we receive my great friend Faith Saghir. So Faith is the head of SRI investing at Mackenzie Investments. So she's an expert in financial services, technology, innovation. Now it's all about impact investing. So she's going to give us great insight. So thank you so much for being here with
Thank you,
us.
Peggy.
Yeah, that's great. So let's get going. So from your perspective, what are the major lasting impacts that COVID will have on financial services?
Thank you for having me, by the way, before I answer that. I think the first one is obviously the ways of working. I think you've talked about that, and I've heard some of your other speakers speak about that. I think, one of the things we're trying to figure out internally is, how do we build a culture virtually, right? If that's what this becomes, what will that new normal become for us, right? And how do you provide employees with the flexibility to work from home, work in the office if they choose to, and then stay safe, but also build that culture, right? I think we're all lucky right now. We came into this with established ways of working and ways of thinking, and that sense of collaboration across different within your own company. But I think going forward, how do you maintain that in a non-physical world, right? If that's what the new normal will be. Yeah, I think as things go back, I know I'm anxious to get back to the office. I like leaving my home at least a few times a week, and actually making an effort to get dressed in the morning. So I do think some normalcy will come back next year, but I think for the remainder of this year we will continue to see the virtual world grow, and you know what, there are individuals that are going to find this is just a better way of working. So that's a big part, that ways of working. I think the other thing I'll mention just within my new role and my new world under the sustainable responsible impact investing umbrella, there's going to be much more scrutiny and focus on climate. I think I've seen multiple publications now point to this disease come out of, or this virus, that it come out from an environmental impact. So that will be a big focus. And I think I do want to pay reference to the racial injustice that's happening now, that's kind of been amplified by the unemployment rates and so on, and by the systemic issues that exist across multiple economies, and is definitely significantly in the US. So I think that's going to also present a new way of working, and new appreciation for community and inclusion and diversity.
That's definitely, if something great can come from the crisis and an acceleration of recognition of, to your point, the injustice, the climate change, all of that, I'm definitely all in for that. Talking about regulations and policies, do you see some changes? And we're talking about impact investing, maybe new regulations to make sure that what is supposed to be ESG or green is really green, or other type of regulations you see coming up?
Yeah, I mean, so yes, I do. Like some of the things that we've been looking at, and I think within the asset management industry more broadly, I think it's been pushed. It's interesting because this movement to ESG and more responsible investing, it started with investors, right, and advocates in the community that wanted to make a change, and it's really then taken now the asset management industry started to take notice years ago, and now the regulators are starting to put the foundation in place. So it's interesting what that journey has been. But I do think a couple of things. So yes, in Canada for sure, we expect that the OSC in Ontario will start to look at this more closely and look at naming conventions and so on, right, for products that identify as having an impact outcome. We're working with many of the other regulatory bodies in Canada to help define what this space is gonna look like. I do think on the other side, I can really appreciate asset managers coming together, and those that coming together to really take hold of shareholder action and shareholder advocacy, right? So we signed on to an investor statement that was issued through the UNPRI a couple of months ago around, companies that are not treating their employees in the best of ways during this pandemic, right? So companies that maybe didn't provide safe working conditions for their employees, or were, laying employees off and not giving them, options to work from home and so on. And so it's really important, I think, for this industry, and that's a key role that we could play to ensure that companies and society at large are taking notice of, social and environmental and governance factors as well. So yes, I think there'll be more changes. I was also really happy. I mean, it's a small thing, but happy to see that the federal government tied the TCFD, the Task Force for Climate, to tie reporting there to any funding that larger organizations were getting from the government. That was a nice way to tie this back to the broader issue of climate beyond the pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. And you need that type of mechanism, reinforcement mechanism. Otherwise, it never happens. In terms of global financial stability or instability, what do you see in terms of post-COVID type of changes, maybe in the short, but also midterm and long term?
Yeah, this is, I'm not sure how to answer that, because this will be interesting, right? There was this movement to more nationalistic, right, a view of the world. You saw this in the US, you saw it in it's happening in Italy and Poland, France, right? Like there was citizens wanting to just hold on to their own nations and what they believed in, and less maybe a movement away from globalization. But I know there's still that sentiment out there, but I think good is prevailing, and that whole notion of globalization and working together, and you see this countries coming together to find a vaccine and so on, and I think that's going to be reflected in the financial system as well. On the SRI side, we see again, for one, regulations kind of making their way, from Europe into North America, which is great. So we'll see much more alignment there. I think just maybe a little bit on the technology side, and I'm sure many of your other speakers have been much more educated in this to speak to it, or knowledgeable in this to speak to it. But I think the concept of, open banking and digitization and so on, that's like we went to working from home happened, almost overnight, right? Within 2 weeks, all of our employees had laptops, everybody was up and running, right? All our, systems that we were looking to implement that maybe we thought was a 6-month project were done overnight. So I think that's our expectation as clients as well from the financial services sector. So I think that'll continue to grow as well, and will be I think a global or macro trend.
So piggybacking on that comment, so in terms of competitive positioning, what do you see happening maybe in the next 3, 6, 9 months, or maybe a bit longer, on organizations that will benefit from the crisis and the ones that unfortunately will fall behind?
Yeah, well, I'd like to think, we're talking a lot internally about social capitalism and where capitalism, what capitalism really stands for, right? And we have one of our brilliant PMs always reminds us of this. But capitalism is not about just your shareholder value, right? It's about ensuring that all of your stakeholders are treated well, and those are your employees, right? So I think companies that treated their employees well will continue to build that loyalty and recruit the best talent. Your clients, right, and how transparent and what their experience is like, and then you also obviously have to produce economic wealth for your shareholders. Again, I won't bring up climate again, but I will, because it's really important, right? Your footprint on the world. So I do think, organizations that are looking at all of their stakeholders, and specifically during this time, their client and employee experience, are going to be the ones to be able to differentiate.
Yeah, once again, probably a great thing coming out of this crisis is this focus on your employees and your clients versus and climate, hopefully, versus just shareholders. So hopefully that's going to stick for the long term. You are head of innovation at IGM, so I'm going to ask you a question you're quite familiar with. So in terms of transformation, where do you see traditional FIs going now that COVID has really accelerated that roadmap, a digital transformation roadmap by the window?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just happened, didn't it? Right? Like I mentioned, like for us from an employee experience perspective, like we were, digital. We've moved. We're on the full Office 365 suite. All everything's moved to everything's centralized that you can access. We're all now on the cloud, which is great. I think from a client perspective. Also, I was, the MFDA a few weeks ago, or maybe it was a couple of weeks into COVID. Sorry to correct that, but a couple of weeks into COVID, they now allow for digital signature, right? So we just moved like all these, like even to your earlier point on the regulators and what shift we're seeing there, like it took us a while to get there because we weren't sure how all this stuff was going to work. I'm signing all my contracts. I haven't printed a single piece of paper since I started working from home. Everything I'm signing through one of the digital signature tools. So I think that's great. So it's definitely accelerated it. I think there's going to be more investment in digitization. I think, I was meeting with an advisor, a financial advisor yesterday, and we did, generally I would have gone into his office and we would have, had a chat, but we did it through Zoom, and we're having a follow-up call through Zoom, right? So I think we're learning how to build relationships in this virtual world. So companies will have to move as fast as we moved in COVID, right?
Exactly.
The other thing I want to mention that maybe, I'm a big fan of the, do-it-yourself and robo-advice and so on that, maybe we didn't touch on. I think, one of the things we're seeing, and we're primarily a wealth, like, Mackenzie being an asset management firm, IG and IPC being a wealth management firm that supports, a few thousand advisors in Canada. We are seeing the value of advice today. Like I say, I talk about digitization, all that great stuff, but me knowing that there's, another individual that is looking after, my money, and that I can talk to, and that's available to me and can help me, ensure I'm not being reactive and doing a sell-off. Of this market during this pandemic has been so emotional, like it's like, what is happening, right? And I think having an advisor, if you have an advisor during this time, it really, those clients and those individuals did really well just from keeping calm during the storm. But I do think we're seeing more so the value of advice being reinforced at this time, which is great for us, and it's something that we believe in.
Yeah, definitely. And, similar to banks where clients might have, lost their job, lost their business, how do I manage my financial situations, but that's in times like that you want digital tools to interact, but you want to interact with a person, because these are exceptional times, and you need to measure advice, which, automation cannot bring.
Yes.
Talking about transformation, so what is the new fate? What is fate 2.0? What are the new habits you might have picked up during the crisis, and hopefully great habits?
Yeah, so no printing, that's for one. And we've actually taken that, we actually had this conversation internally. And so we've been, thinking about what are the things that those good behaviors that we've developed working from home that we can bring back to the office, right? This is a great opportunity to do so. And so one of those things is printing, right? We're reducing our printer footprint across our organization, which is really, really great. So that was one good thing. I think not spending money on shopping for me personally has been a good transformation that I could take forward. But I'm spending much more money on food, which is, so good.
Exactly.
But also getting comfortable, like I mentioned earlier, is getting comfortable speaking to people, right, through a screen. It's not great on the eyes when you're doing 8-9 hours of calls through Zoom or Teams and so on, but I think it's reading the room and building empathy and awareness when you're so far. Learning how to do that in the virtual world is definitely something we're all trying to learn.
I think it's very difficult in group meetings. I think it's fine one-on-one, especially when you already have a pre-existing relationship.
Yeah.
But when you're trying to speak and you are free for people, I think, at least for me, like I'm like absolutely lost in, it's difficult to keep the momentum.
Yes, I agree. And when I moved into this role, I was telling another colleague of mine earlier. So I moved into this role at the beginning of February, and within this, and I love the organization I work for. I've been there. I know I'll be there a long time if they'll have me. But prior to this role, my primary partners had been in technology. Right. I spent a lot of time with our distribution team, right, thinking about our advisor, client experience, and so on. Spent a lot of time with our marketing teams, and so I moved into this role. Now I'm having to build relationships. I've got new stakeholders, within investment management, and even more relationships within our product teams and so on. And this was very challenging to build those relationships and to get to know people through a screen. So it didn't feel so good in the beginning, right? Generally, you would have asked them to let's go for a coffee, let's grab a lunch, right, and get to know each other and figure out how we're going to work together. And so doing that through the phone and online has definitely been challenging, but it's doable.
Well, and on the bright side, I'm sure you have plenty of these people who are not based in Toronto.
Yes.
Who are able to also, meet and chat with people more often than you would have done. You might have said, okay, I'll meet you in 3 months when I'm coming to Winnipeg.
Yes.
You're not going while you're doing it right away, So there are pros and cons to the situation. I like the fact that I can speak with people from France, from people in the US, Canada, in the same day.
Yes.
Well, I would have not done that because I would have waited to have a trip to meet all these people, So and way more open to that. Before it would be, well, I don't want to do business with you if you're not coming to see me in person.
Yes.
Well, no one can see each other in person. So it's like, well, great. You jump on the opportunity to speak with people who are in a totally different geography.
Yes. Yes. Agreed.
So
yeah.
thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time. It was great. I'm really, really glad we were able to do that. I know you're always very busy, but even more busy right now. And really happy that you're enjoying your new role.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Faith.
Bye.